to WTO rules after all the rest of the world operates successfully with those rules, because we need to be free of the tentacles of the Lisbon Treaty, because what the Lisbon Treaty has done, the Lisbon Treaty has gradually squeezed out every bit of democracy and trying to within the member states. You look at all the things that have been signed, the accession signed by the Tories in 1972. There was no referendum, no consultation. The single market signed by the Tories in 1986, no referendum, no consultation. Maastricht signed by the Conservatives in 92, no referendum, no consultation. Amsterdam signed by Labour 97, no referendum, no consultation. Nice signed by Labour 2000, no referendum. Lisbon signed by Labour, no referendum. And despite many countries voting against many of those treaties, what did the EU do? Turn around and said, you're going to have another referendum, and this time you'll support it. And that's what they've been trying to do with us. But they're not going to succeed, because they have... because they underestimate, and they shouldn't underestimate, if they look back at the history of this country, they underestimate how strong we are when we are up against it. And we are up against it at the EU, and we're going to win. Now, I just want to say something about Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland border, because I come from Northern Ireland. I know all about the border. I remember the border. My first and most important point, and it is one that I have to say the Prime Minister made very clearly this week: Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom, and we will not allow any deal, anything to change that situation. And let's not forget that the hard border, the only time there's been a hard border was when the IRA were coming over, killing British soldiers, killing policemen, putting their bombs there, bringing over ammunition, bringing over bombs. That was when the hard border was there. There's always been a common travel area, and this whole border issue, which is now becoming this huge chibboleth that is apparently stopping all progress, has been absolutely politicised by both the EU and, I'm afraid to say, the Irish government. And the worst thing of all is the idea that we, in this country, should change our policy on leaving the EU or making part of the United Kingdom stay in bits of the EU because it might bring back the dissidents. What kind of country are we that we actually would change our policy because of a few hoodlums and gangsters that we should be putting in jail and not changing our policy to actually correct? And I have to say that I hear a little bird tells me that the Irish Taoiseach might actually want to become an EU commissioner. And that might be why he's trying to sort of curry favour So I think, finally on the border issue, I think what we should simply say to the EU is, if you want a border, you build it. If the Irish Republic want a border, they can build it. We are not building a border between Northern Ireland and the Republic. I think I'm being looked at. Have I gone on too long? Right. I just... I want to just be optimistic, having started off being very angry. You know, we are a great country. We are the 5th largest economy in the world by GDP standards. We're one of the 5 major military powers. We have a seat at the United Nations Security Council. We are amongst the leaders in IT development. We have the second largest aerospace industry in the world. We have more world-class universities than the rest of the EU combined. We have the most efficient agricultural sector in the EU. Our legal system is respected all over the world, and we have the English language. So what have we got to fear by becoming an independent, free country? We have to show that we are determined that the vote of the British people 2 years ago will be honoured. The more we are bullied, the more the EU bullies us, the more we see some members of Parliament trying to step back on what the vote was, the more determined we are that we will win. And I have to say that there are 2 or 3 things that everybody here can do. One is that, as has already been said, do write to your own Member of Parliament, even if they are a Leaver and a very strong Leaver, and I know that your own local MP will be appearing here today, but make sure you write to your MP, either to give them encouragement or to remind them of what that referendum was about, and to remind them that Parliament voted by a huge majority that it would be the final say. That it wouldn't be, there'd be no second chance, no coming back. This was your decision. And Cameron himself said that. And of course he said it because he thought he was going to win by hands down. But the reality is we need to be saying that. We need to be challenging all the time, challenging our MPs, challenging those establishments, those people in the establishment who have that doom and gloom, and actually challenge them to say whose side they are on. I have great confidence in our country. I believe that we need to get out there, that a no deal is a no problem. No deal is no problem. That is what we need to be saying. And if they don't want to trade with us freely, then no deal, and no deal is no problem. Theresa May memorably stated, Brexit means Brexit. So what does the word Brexit mean? It stands for Britain and exit. Exit means leave. And what part of leave do the hardcore Remainers not understand? I say to them, get on with it!
Isn't she fantastic? If only the House of Commons had 649 other people like Kate Hoey. The next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, of course, needs little introduction. But it is worth reminding ourselves of what he has achieved. He has battled for this cause for the last 25 years or more. He's one of the original Brexiteers. He has slowly but surely changed the course of British political history. And he will, without question, go down as one of the most significant political figures in the last 50 or 60 years. He is a man of the most incredible energy and enormous courage. The abuse, the vilification he's had from the establishment, the Westminster elite, has been unbelievable. He survived plane crashes that would have killed most people. Because he is a true patriot, ladies and gentlemen. Before we welcome him, let's just remind ourselves of some of his recent thoughts and clips in this video.
It sounds as if you smell betrayal in the air.
The compromise that she put forward at Chequers last week, the PM's country home, frankly was a betrayal. I'm going to try and get the people to let their members of Parliament know they will not accept being betrayed.
And I tell you what, if I have to do this again, next time, no more Mr. Nice Guy.
We had a referendum. We voted for something Our politicians should deliver this. We have made our minds up in the greatest democratic exercise in the history of this country. I trust the voice of the people more than the politicians.
Please welcome to the stage, Nigel Farage.
Good afternoon, Bolton. I didn't think we'd have to do this again. You see, I thought we'd won on the 23rd of June 2016 in what was the greatest democratic exercise in the history of this nation. We voted to leave, and I thought our politicians would deliver. Well, they haven't. So, you know what? We're back and we'll fight them again. Now, I have to say this is a great venue, but I'm very pleased there's been a name change. Because it's now, of course, the University of Bolton, Bolton Wanderers ground. The last time I came here, it was called the Macron Stadium. And just look at how that man behaved at Salzburg on Thursday, saying that all of us who'd been part of the Leave campaign were all a bunch of liars. And if that wasn't bad enough, just look at Juncker and Barnier and Tusk. And I may not be Theresa May's biggest fan, but I tell you what, I'll be damned if we should allow foreign unelected bureaucrats, people who have power without accountability, to treat our Prime Minister like that. So let's just remind ourselves what actually happened on June 23rd, 2016. What happened despite the big political parties, despite the big companies, despite the big banks, despite big global politics, including, of course, President Obama coming to our country to tell us what we should do, despite threats of disaster. Do you remember? From Osborne, there was going to be an emergency budget. Hundreds of thousands of jobs would be lost immediately. We would sink into being a third world nation. They almost told us that if we dared to vote leave, plagues of black locusts would descend on our land. And despite all those threats, and despite 50 years of never being told the truth about the European project, despite all of it, we stood up and we voted to leave. We voted, folks, for independence. We didn't vote for whatever negotiations may lead to. We didn't vote for a series of deals. We didn't vote because of some ludicrous projection of what may or may not happen to our gross domestic product. This was a vote about us taking back our country, taking back the ability to make our laws, taking back control of our borders and being an independent nation. And every single major player on both the Leave and the Remain side said that if we vote to leave, we are leaving the European Union, we are leaving the single market, we are leaving all aspects
of that political club. It could not have been clearer. And yet today, they tell us we didn't know what we voted for. Well, the hell with them. We did know what we voted for. And we voted for it once. And then, the next year, there was a general election. A general election in which the leader of the Labour Party, Jeremy Corbyn, made it clear that we were voting to leave the European Union and the single market. He couldn't have been clearer. And Theresa May told us we were voting to leave the European Union and the single market. We haven't voted for this Brexit once. We voted for this Brexit twice. And how dare they try to make and vote all over again? How dare they do it to us? But that is what is going on. What is going on is the express will of the British people, which we were told in that £9 million leaflet that David Cameron sent through all of our doors. Do you remember? Yeah, I posted mine back through number 10. I enjoyed doing that. But as that leaflet told us, and as everybody told us, our vote would not just be respected, our vote would be final. But the truth is, folks, our career political class do not respect the Brexit vote, and they are doing, and there are brave exceptions, you've just seen one, but there are, in general, the vast majority of our elected politicians want to dilute it, to delay it, to suspend it, to overturn it, and they and their friends in the international community and one or two former senior politicians like Tony Blair, who have come back to the stage, they do not want to give us Brexit. In fact, on the current course, with Mrs May's Chequers plan, the very best we would get is Brexit in name only, and that is not good enough, is it? And I think the betrayal, and we may be on the verge of a very great Labour betrayal if this Labour conference indeed votes for us to have a second referendum. But even without that, and despite the fact that the two leaders of the Labour Party have been Brexiteers themselves through their careers, the fact is the Parliamentary Labour Party is fanatically pro-EU, and the Labour Party are taking us towards a position of staying in the customs union and in the single market. And I'm bored with the endless media coverage about what is happening within the Conservative Party. There is as great a betrayal going on in this country of the 5 million people who voted for Jeremy Corbyn and who voted for Brexit in towns like Bolton. Now, as I say, I didn't think we'd need to get back campaigning, but it's pretty clear that we do. What is it we in Leave Means Leave are asking you to do? Well, the Remain camp have virtually every single day since the referendum been lobbying and campaigning. They put out their constant negative diet of news, don't they? They tell us the jobs that'll be lost. They tell us that if we leave on WTO rules, it'll be falling off the edge of a cliff. The whole thing will be a catastrophe. There is a constant negative diet of news being put out to the British people. And we on the Leave side, and okay, perhaps you can say we're guilty of this, but we on the Leave side, after we won, went off and did our respective things. We've not been campaigning in an organised fashion in any way at all. I am proud to join Leave Means Leave. This is a organisation that is above and beyond and far more important than any tribal party politics. This organisation is about our country and honouring the Brexit vote. And we will start to counter that endless negative narrative. You know, drop Chequers, Mrs May, put on the table a genuine free trade deal without any political linkage, and I think the German car industry would probably bite our arm off. I mean, after all, they call us Treasure Island. They sell so many BMWs here. But if it comes to it, and if the bully boys of Brussels, well, they're not bully boys. It's the wrong word. They're a bunch of gangsters. That's the only possible way. This happened once. I was in the European Parliament giving one of my speeches, and for those that have seen I'm always very helpful, constructive, you know, in every way I can be. And I said to the European Commission, "You're behaving like the mafia." And the chairman of the Parliament, who's an Italian, said, "Mr. Farage, for Italians, that's very offensive, politically insensitive, and for the first time ever, I apologise." I said, "I'm very sorry. I won't call you the mafia in future. I'll just call you gangsters." And I've stuck with that pretty consistently ever since. So number one, what we'll do in Leave Means Leave is we will start to put out a counter-narrative. We will explain that a free trade deal is possible if that's what the gangsters in Brussels want. And if they don't, that is fine. If they don't, we will leave with no deal. And far from being a cliff edge, no deal, no problem. No deal, we're an independent country. That is what matters. But there's an even more important job that we have to do, although we can't do it. We can merely suggest it to you. You see, our very out of touch political class think they can get away with this, think they can turn Brexit away and that you will barely notice, and certainly that you won't do anything about it. And I think it's about time. I think it's about time that our elected politicians began to feel the heat over the extent of the betrayal they're putting on this country. You will find on your chairs the names, addresses, emails, phone numbers of all the local MPs in the Bolton area who do not wish to clearly take us out of the European Union, take us out of the single market and put back proper border controls in this country. And for this to be successful, what we need you to do, we need you to be queuing up outside their constituency offices. We need you to say to these MPs, if you betray what we instructed you to do, we will never vote for you again. And we'll do it, and we'll do it politely. We'll do it without abusive language. We will do it in the best traditions of this country, but we will do it firmly. We will make them know where we stand on this issue. So please, please do that. Take from us, I hope, the lead that says there's nothing that scares politicians more than the prospect of losing their jobs. It concentrates the mind rather wonderfully, I think. So let's do that. And I would also ask you, please subscribe to Leave Means Leave. We are of all parties and we are of none. But what today is about, and it's my first day back on a political stage since June 2016. Thank you. But we now have to prepare for all eventualities. We do not know what our political class will throw at us. I want us to get them to change their minds. I want them to deliver a proper Brexit on March the 29th next year. That June 23rd date's still there the whole time. Well, of course, it should be a national holiday, shouldn't it? It's one way out of a mistake, isn't it? But what we've got to do, what we've absolutely got to do, and I'm back here today with Leave Means Leave. I'm asking you to help us, subscribe to us, to help us. Today is the relaunch. We'll be ready for any eventuality they throw at us. Today is the rebirth of the People's Army that gave us Brexit, and now we must deliver it. Thank you.
I think
Thank you, Bolton. Thank you. Thank you. Come on, we can do it, can't we? We can do it. We can do it. Thank you.
I think it's fair to say, ladies and gentlemen, in the last couple of years, he hasn't lost his touch, has he? In fact, I think he's just warming up. He's really enjoying this. He's glad to be back on the trail. Our third speaker, ladies and gentlemen, again needs little introduction. He is a man of real principle. He's been at the heart of the negotiating process in the last 18 months or so. He knew what we needed to do. He knew the sort of deal that would make sense. But sadly, ladies and gentlemen, he wasn't supported by other parts of the government and the civil service. And eventually he had to conclude, with regret, that he couldn't support the Chequers policy. So as a man of principle, he did the only decent thing he could do. Before we welcome him to the stage, let's just look at a few clips of our next speaker.
Top story, Brexit Secretary David Davis has resigned from government. The man who is in charge of our negotiations with Brussels.
They're said to be furious with the way the whole thing had been handled. Less and less likely, given Theresa May's plan, that the UK would leave the customs union and single market.
I just don't agree with her on this fundamental policy, which unfortunately is central to my older brief. It would have been me that had to carry it out, me that had to present it to Parliament, me that had to make it work in the European Union. And frankly, if I don't believe in it, I'm not the best person to do it.
Please welcome to the stage, David Davis, MP.
One piece of easy advice. Never agree to speak after Nigel Farage. He's not bad for a beginner, is he, really? And in the cross-party spirit of this occasion, I want to start, actually, by paying tribute to the first speaker, Kate Hoey. It's easy for me. I've got 100 allies, at least, on my side of the house. Well, I hope 100. But for her and her few tough resistance fighters in the Labour Party, it's really, really difficult. And she has been the bravest MP I have seen for many a year. Now, the danger about coming on last in one of these things is that everything gets said first. Indeed, this happened to me once before. And I got to the door and I said this to the doorman. I said, It's a bit difficult, this speech, because they've all said it already. And he said, that's all right, Mr. Davis. Everything's been said, but it's not yet been said by everyone. You know, so let's see how we get on today. I've got to start, Nigel, thank you very much, by deleting all my Macron jokes. But let's get down to the serious issue. June 23rd, in 2016, not this year, Nigel, it's, you know, June 23rd was the greatest democratic event in our history. It was the most important political decision in our modern history. 17.5 million people made a decision. But some people in Britain today and some people in Europe think that they know better. We know they don't. And our task today, and our task for the next however long it takes, is simple but historic. And that is, we have to make sure that the British government delivers on that decision without dilution or delay, delivers on that decision and gives us a real Brexit. Now, you know, because you've just been told, that I have a serious difference of opinion with our Prime Minister. But even so, I have to tell you that I view the behaviour of the European Union leaders at Salzburg with contempt. With contempt. Bad manners and discourtesy are not the hallmarks of great men. Indeed, I rather felt that we should send them Jacob Rees-Mogg to give them some lessons in manners. Now, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, she and I have always treated the European Union leadership with respect. Maybe sometimes too much respect, but with respect. My comment to them after Thursday is disrespect our Prime Minister and you disrespect our country. Disrespect the decision of the British people, Mr. Macron, and you disrespect our democracy. And if you think you can bully our country, all I can do is recommend you read some history books. Now, everybody in this room has one thing in common. We don't just love our country, we believe in our country. We consider ourselves lucky to be born here. It is astonishing how a small island off the northwest coast of Europe with less than 1% of the population of the world is so powerful, so successful, so influential, so effective, so magnificent, frankly. Such a great country, Great Britain. It was the first great parliamentary democracy. It has one of the fairest justice systems in the world. This country has carried the banner of freedom higher and for longer than any other country in the world. We were the inventors of the Industrial Revolution. We look back on Newton, Michael Faraday, Alexander Fleming, a list, back to Shakespeare, of great geniuses that grew out of that free speech and that free action that they're allowed in this country and were allowed long before they were anywhere else. And of course, as Kate said, we have the advantage of the English language. Not just for ourselves, but worldwide. The language of the internet, the language of medicine and science and engineering and international law and international commerce and the media. What have we got to fear? And I noticed Kate listing the international organisations we're members of, the member of the United Nations Security Council, leading member of NATO, leading member of the Commonwealth, and a number of others that she laid out before you. And I was standing up there, and I was just standing there thinking, yeah, and that was all before we were members of the European Union. So for all those reasons, we have nothing to fear. We have nothing to fear. And that is the reason why we should only accept a clean and clear Brexit. Not some fudge, not some weak compromise. And I have to tell you, I'm afraid that a weak compromise is exactly what I think Chequers is. That's why I resigned, and that's why I'm standing in front of you here today, because we've had to restart this campaign to give back the British people what they have already won for themselves once over. So well, let's talk about democracy. What do the British people think of Chequers? More than half of them? More than half of them oppose it. Less than a fifth of them support it. And they're right. Now, why are they right? There are many reasons, there are many things wrong with Chequers, but I'm going to focus on just one for you today, because it's central to what we thought we were voting for back on June 23rd, 2016. The government is proposing a common rule book for the regulation of our industry. This is a very delicate turn of phrase, a common rule book. What does it mean? It's common only that it means it's written by the European Union and obeyed by us. That's what a common rule book means. For a nation that's seeking its independence in the world, seeking to make its own way in the world, this is simply ridiculous. This is simply untenable. For the fifth largest economy in the world, leading the way on innovation, we cannot be governed by a body in which we have no say, no influence, no vote. It should not even be contemplated. We should be discussing we should by all means be discussing these rules with them as collaborators and cooperators, but not taking orders. And let me just give you one practical effect of this, because you will see time and again big businessmen interested in defending their own business as it exists today, under the existing rules today, say this is what we need. You know, we're in the chemical industry. We don't have very many changes in rules. We'll live by this. We're in the car industry. We don't have many rule changes. We'll live by this. But what about our future? What about those industries that are going to matter to us in the future? We are a leading country in artificial intelligence, in life sciences, in self-driving cars, in genetics. How on earth are we going to stay a leading country if the rules for those industries are written by our competitors and written in a way to disadvantage us? Of course, we're told there's no alternative. Well, that's plumb wrong. That is just a lie. I'm afraid it's untrue. The best answer for us, and incidentally, the best answer for the European Union, is a free trade deal, an advanced and streamlined free trade deal based on the best in the world. That's the answer we need to go for. Now, the European Union has actually already demonstrated both its interest and capacity for doing these free trade deals. It's done one. It's done one with Canada. It's done another one with South Korea. It's in the middle of doing one with Japan. The Canada deal was the European Union's most ambitious and extensive trade deal. It's an agreement between two sovereign entities with zero tariffs, but no free movement, no payment of vast sums of money, no European court oversight, no interference in Canadian laws. So why can't we have that? Why can't we have that? Now, I've talked, you may have heard me talk about it when I was still a minister, about Canada plus, plus, plus. What does it mean? It means the best of Canada, plus Korea, plus Japan, plus all the other deals the European Union has done. Using just the precedents the European Union itself has created, we can create the best trade deal in the world. And I'm anxious not to put you off, but both Donald Tusk and Michel Barnier have stated they agree with this. In March of this year, they said that they wanted to see a free trade deal, and they accepted that it would be more advanced than any free trade deal we've had so far. So why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we doing it? No, that's not the right answer. You know, once at a previous meeting like this, I was unwise enough to ask the audience a question then. And it was in Gateshead. It was, I think it was the Monday, wasn't it? Before, he knows what I'm going to say, before the actual vote in the referendum. And I said to the audience, now tell me, who's the most important person in Europe? And a roar of Nigel Farage came back from the audience, you know. So the old rule is in politics, don't ask a question to which you don't know the answer. But in this case, it's don't ask a question to which the audience doesn't know the answer. Now, the reason that is given, one of the reasons is given, Kate referred to earlier, and that is the question of the Northern Ireland border. And the first thing to say is, as she said in a way, we are not going to put up a hard border under any circumstances. Full stop, end of story. And if you go to Mr. Varadkar and ask him, he'll say, I'm not going to put up a hard border under any circumstances. And if you go to the European Union, they say, they're not going to force a hard border under any circumstances. So where's the problem? Well, the problem is political rather than practical, because there's already a border there. I've visited the border on quite a lot of occasions over the years. And the first time I started to visit it was because of the fact that paramilitary organizations were using smuggling across the border as a way of funding their activities, and we managed to shut that down in various ways. But I've been there a number of times, and there is a currency border. There is a judicial border. There is a tax border, a VAT border, an excise border, a corporation tax border, an income tax border. And they all operate perfectly well without a visible border. All of the customs work is done by intelligence-led customs investigations, and we manage that border. I won't guarantee you there's no smuggling there, but it works perfectly well. It works perfectly well. And if we have a tariff-free arrangement with the European Union, there'll be no other money to be collected at the border, so you don't need the border for that. And if the European Union is worried about goods coming in from the rest of the world and making their way through Belfast, down to Dublin, and then across to Bavaria or wherever. It's an astonishing way to smuggle goods in, but if they're worried about that, well, there are 5 commercial ports in Northern Ireland, and 2 airports, and we can monitor them too. And finally, of course, there's the regulatory issue. But actually, we already have special arrangements for Northern Ireland, which doesn't differentiate it doesn't cause a border down the Irish Sea. They have different arrangements on carbon pricing, so that electricity can be made economically in Northern Ireland. We have different arrangements. It's a common epidemiological area, in other words, a common biosecurity area, so that if there's mad cow disease, as it was in the first case, or foot and mouth, something like that, the island of Ireland is protected, and Northern Irish farmers are protected too. So we have mechanisms. This can be done if the Irish government is willing to talk to us about practical solutions to a practical problem. This is nothing more than a way of bending the British government to the will of the European Union over the single market and the integrity of the United Kingdom. Now, yesterday on television, one of the things the Prime Minister said very firmly is that no deal is better than a bad deal. And I think she does mean it. I think she does mean it. And I think, frankly, Salzburg may have had one remarkable effect on British politics. It may have introduced some steel into some of it. So the situation is that no deal is better than a bad deal. Or to put it more accurately, a World Trade Organization deal is better than a bad deal. And why do I say that? Is this just wishful thinking on my part? Because actually, if you look at some of the most successful countries in selling into the single market, they're actually already using World Trade Organization rules because they're coming from outside the single market. We are being out-competed, actually, by some other countries in the rest of the world into the single market who have to put up with these rules and regulations already. So it's not difficult, well, it's not impossible, and it's not actually, in my view, particularly difficult to make it work. That being said, it's not the best deal. The best deal is a trade deal. But it's not just not the best deal for us. I was in Munich on the same day the Prime Minister was in Salzburg. I was talking to a mixture of German politicians, academics, and businessmen about the consequences for Germany if there were a tariff system in place. Essentially, it would mean that the car industry in Bavaria, where I was speaking, would lose about 1/3 of its exports to this country. That's 1/3 of the second biggest, fastest growing car market in the European Union. They'd lose 2/3 of their dairy exports to the United Kingdom. France will lose a significant portion of its wine exports. Well, there's always Australian and Chilean and so on for us. But just see how the French farmers feel about that. Mr. Macron has already got even lower popularity ratings than Mr. Hollande, which is pretty difficult in its own right. Think how it'll go after that. But not just them, also Belgium and the Netherlands will lose large parts of their cross-channel trade. And the worst hit of all will be Ireland. Don't cheer. I mean, I don't wish economic downturn on anybody. And actually, one of the arguments against a WTO deal for me is what it would actually do to our neighbours. Because actually, I think they would suffer worse than we would. We have got a free-floating currency, which will compensate for any changes in trade arrangements. We have got our own free government at that point, which is completely unfettered by regulations of any sort other than the ones it wants to impose itself. But most of all for us, for the last 20 years, at least, the rest of the world trade has been growing for us faster than European trade. 20 years ago, 60% of our trade was with Europe and 40% with the rest of the world. Now it's the other way round. 60% with the rest of the world. And as we leave the European Union, that change will get faster and faster and faster. And that will be what powers the British economy in the coming years. So, in conclusion, free trade, a free trade plus deal, we take back control of our laws, our borders and our money, but seek a true free trade partnership with what I hope will be a friend and ally. I am confident that with sufficient will and purpose, such a deal can be achieved. We're standing on the brink of a historic change. Future generations will judge our decisions in the next year or so, and they'll make a judgment as to whether we have grasped the opportunities that are available to us, the new future that's available to the British people and our children and our grandchildren and their children too. All we need is the courage to reclaim our birthright, to govern our own country, to make our own laws and to determine our own destiny. Thank you.
Brilliant, David. You grab. Fantastic. Thank you. Another man, ladies and gentlemen. Another man of great political courage. So we've got a number of questions from people as they arrived, and what we're going to do for sort of 15-20 minutes, we're going to look at some of those questions and discuss them. So please welcome to the stage the author and commentator Isabel Oakeshott, together with your local Bolton West MP Chris Green, and John Longworth is coming back. Brilliant. Isabel, over to you.
Thank you. Right. Is this working? No? Okay. Technical people?
Have we got Isabel? Can we hear Isabel?
Well, I'm not saying anything yet. Okay. Can somebody sort out the microphone?
Pharaoh's is comedy gold, it's good.
Right. All right. Sorry.
Have you shot the audience much?
Right. I'm going to do this slightly differently. Does this work?
Hey Lee, can we get the mic to work?
Is this one working? Can you hear this?
Testing it.
Right.
Okay. Yes.
Yes.
Does this now work or not? No.
Yeah, that's
all right. Okay. Well, we're going to do this slightly differently because I think also Chris is also lacking a microphone, but we're going to bust it, and we'll be fine with that. I want to start with a question about what's going to happen in Parliament, because we haven't actually discussed the way that the Parliament, the Commons, is likely to react. Speak. Okay, there we go. Finally. All right. I was just saying that we're going to have to do this a little bit differently because I think our MP here is also lacking a microphone. So I'm going to invite him to come up and answer the first question from the podium here. We've got a question here from, well, actually, somebody called Bill Wood in the audience. and it's about Chequers, which seems to have achieved the apparently impossible by uniting just about everybody in this country on all sides of the argument. Everybody hates Chequers. So what I think a lot of people want to know is what will happen if the Chequers deal is voted down in the House of Commons and if no deal is also rejected. And I wonder whether Chris can talk us through how he thinks that would play out in Parliament and what will happen next. Thank you, Chris.
Hello, it's fantastic to be here today, especially as I'm the local Member of Parliament. It's an incredible campaign a couple of years ago on leaving the European Union, cross-party, a really positive message, and I think Kate Hoey highlighted actually the attitude of so many people when they campaign to leave the European Union. We have so many great positive qualities here, and this is what we have to look to in the future. And Chequers looks as though it's sunk below the waterline. That's not now going to be delivered. So the European Union is being instructed by the Prime Minister to come back with a deal. I don't know what kind of deal they're going to come back with, if they're going to come back with one at all. And this is the time to start being clear. It's not a no deal, it's World Trade Organization rules. That's how we trade with the United States of America. We ought to be determined now, from the government and the whole of Parliament, to be determined to deliver on WTO. That's our starting point. But we have the opportunity to do so much more. We still have about 6 months to go. We can still do a far better trade deal with the European Union. They just have to believe that we believe in ourselves. And listening to this audience here today, I think we do. There's nothing to fear about WTO, but we can do so much better. We're going to get that message across. And it woe betide any politician who tries to thwart the will of the British people. Thank you.
David, could I bring you in on this as well? You know, talking about the parliamentary arithmetic a bit and how you see this playing out.
Well, now, can you hear me? Yep. Yep, right. The first thing is that, as you say, I think Chequers is dead in the water, unless the Labour Party changes its position, which I think is unlikely. That's the first thing. It's quite difficult to stop no deal happening, because when we put those bills in front of Parliament, the Article 50 bill, so-called, and the withdrawal bill, the presumption... Can you hear me now? All right. The presumption is that we leave on the 29th of March next year. It's written into the law. Now, it is possible, somehow or other, I guess, that some other piece of law could be amended, but it's quite difficult to see the British Parliament actually shaping up to do that. I think that'd be very, very unlikely. The Prime Minister said plainly she expects if there's no deal, then that's what happens. We leave anyway. That means the majority of the Tory party, the brave few Labour members, and I suspect that will be enough for the DUP to get us through. So I don't think the idea of us not leaving at all is on the cards whatsoever.
I think a lot of people will be encouraged by that, but there is another risk, which is the possibility of MPs clubbing together and conspiring to actually extend Article 50 and draw this out longer. And I wonder whether, David, you see that as a significant risk.
Well, it's clearly what some people are planning, but again, I think they face the same arithmetic as the trying to stop us leaving. So I don't think it will succeed. But, you know, this is going to be a close-fought battle from now until we leave in March. It's why this meeting matters, you know? There was a poll in, I think it was yesterday or today, which showed that of the, I think it's 17 of the 25 most marginal Labour seats, would be lost to the Labour Party if their members attempted to thwart Brexit. That's a very serious threat. And similar threats would apply to marginal Conservative seats. So I think there'll be a great deal of pressure, but it does depend, as ever it always does in a democracy, on the people of this country expressing their view.
Kate, can I bring you in here? Because we've got the Labour Party conference coming up. And I'm wondering if Labour, at their conference, adopts second referendum as official party policy, how do you think that leaves Jeremy Corbyn's position? We've already seen that he's virtually impossible to oust within his own parliamentary party. But will that not leave him feeling very compromised personally?
Well, I think, can you hear me? Great, great. I think the conference there'll be an attempt, as there is usually at these kinds of crunch things, to have another kind of fudge. And the fudge will be more pushing towards, we want a general election. You know, that is what Jeremy Corbyn even said yesterday after the Prime Minister, after she came back. And I think that I'd be surprised if if conference actually pushes a straightforward motion, we want a second referendum. But I think that, you know, we have to accept that there are people within the parliamentary party who will put the party in terms of getting a general election and opposing the Conservative government whatever way they can, even if that is to mean that they might end up going against the wishes not just of their own constituency but of the whole country. So I think David is quite right that this relaunch has come at the absolutely crucial time for you to be able to do things. And I know over the last 6 months, and I think many of us feel a little bit guilty almost, that after we got that fantastic vote on June the 23rd, 2 years ago, that we did take our eyes off the ball. We assumed that it would be happening. We were Democrats. The people had voted. What we didn't understand until a little bit later was just how from the day after people voted to leave, there was that core group of zealotry Remainers, very involved with, who were able to get a lot of money very quickly to start the fight back for them. And yes, I think a lot of the money came from abroad, yes, absolutely. And they have been doing all that work. Now, we have come to this later than we should have, although Leave Mean Leave has been doing some work. But this now is your opportunity to really, as I used to say before the referendum, I remember when I was speaking at rallies, I would say, if you can just convince one other person who's never voted before, to go out and vote. Now I think your job is to go out and actually say the kinds of things, be the evangelist for the sorts of messages that we've been getting today. And so that your MP will know that you know what you're talking about, you're prepared to go out and be on the streets and campaign, and that we will...
Thank you. Thanks, Kate. So I've got another question here, which I think is really important and something that we've barely touched on today. And it's actually remarkable how this subject seems to have disappeared from the forefront of the debate. And yet, it is one of the key reasons why people voted to leave. And it is immigration. So this question, which is anonymous but could come from many of us in this room, just says nobody is talking about immigration. What style of immigration do you think will be workable after we leave the EU? And can we trust the government to deliver on the changes in immigration that people were really voting for when they voted to leave? I think I will come first on this to Nigel.
Yeah, well, quite right too. I've been talking about this for a long time.
You're the one with a foreign name.
Yeah, well yes, but we have been here 300 years, David. I'm just about excused, honestly. You know, it was obvious, wasn't it, from 2004, when we opened the doors unconditionally to 8 and then 10 former communist countries where minimum wage, you know, was perhaps 7 or 8 times greater in this country than it was. It was obvious what was going to happen, wasn't it? You did not need to be a rocket scientist to know that Tony Blair's prediction of an extra 13,000 people a year was not going to be right. Now, if you ally that to non-EU immigration, which of course from 2010 Theresa May was in charge of and handled appallingly, we've had net migration running at levels completely unprecedented in this country. The population of this country has risen by 6.5 million since 2001. 6.5 million. You wonder why the M6 is busy? Well, think about it. And 82% of that is directly down to immigration. So what we were saying with Brexit was, we want to take back control. We're not opposed to immigration. We're for immigration. We want it managed properly, sensibly. We want... But it is an issue that they find embarrassing to talk about in London. They really would rather not discuss it at all. Labour, I can't discern what Labour's policy is on EU free movement, but it looks to me like no change, but Kate may correct me. And it suits the Conservative Party not to talk about it. And David will correct me if I'm wrong, but it's barely been raised in the negotiations. They've kicked the can effectively down the road. And I honestly think that it is part of the betrayal that I'm talking about this afternoon, is they intend to do nothing about it because they think you won't notice. Lobby them, tell them it's not good enough.
Thank you. And Chris?
Well, we need to take back control over our money, our laws and our borders. But I do think it's right to reflect, as Kate Hoey mentioned earlier, Barbara Castle, Blackburn MP, just up the road. And she was talking about, back in the 70s, that a Frenchman should not be put above an Australian. A German should not be put above a Malayan. We ought to be able to have an immigration system in Britain that suits the needs of the British people, getting the skills into the United Kingdom that we need, those that we want, but also making sure that the immigration system actually makes us feel proud that some of the most talented people in the world want to come to the United Kingdom to make a huge contribution. We need to change the narrative, and taking back control on immigration can change the narrative to actually make it a positive issue rather than such a negative one.
So we're nearly out of time now, but I just want to wrap up by asking each of our panel to say very simply what they feel about if the worst comes to the worst and we do get forced into a position where we have to have a second referendum. I would like each... I would like to know from each of the panel whether they think we have anything to be afraid of. Can we start with you, John? Okay. Thank you very much for your. Thank you very much. There were a few questions submitted about the armed forces. We are very tight for time. I know it is a significant concern, but I want to fix very firmly on the scenario of a second referendum. John, please.
Can you hear me? My mic on? Can you hear this? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Just come up.
Yes, okay. Well, first of all, let me say we're very conscious of the armed forces issue, so don't think we're not thinking about that. It's absolutely top of our agenda. We will win a second referendum.
Thank you. That was nice and simple. Chris?
The whole talk about a second referendum is a plan to delay and delay, to send a message to those businesses, don't invest in the UK. They want unemployment to go up, for our economy to be damaged, so we have to turn to the European Union for salvation. It ain't going to happen.
David?
Let me quickly deal with the armed services. NATO first and last is the answer for our armed services. That's what we support, not PESCO, nothing else. Now, the issue of that there will not be a second referendum. If there were, if they were, judging by the people I meet outside London, in my constituency, north of England, judging by them, it would be 60-40 in our favour. So I think it would be much stronger than it was before. But the one thing I would say about a second referendum is this. Its impact would not be in changing the decision. Its impact would be in undermining the negotiation. Because the European Union would still like to keep getting our money. They don't want us to leave. So they would give us the worst possible deal to try to buy us such a second referendum. That's why it mustn't happen.
Thank you. Nigel?
I agree with the point the gentleman raises. The fact that 3 Battalion, the Parachute Regiment, landed in Bosnia-Herzegovina 2 weeks ago with European Union flags on their arms, I think is a disgrace. And the sooner the government says we will not cooperate with the European army but put our faith in NATO, the better. And if we keep the military analogy going, the whole point of having an army is you hope you never have to use it. But it's there just in case. I said to you today, we're rebuilding the People's Army. And I think the bigger and stronger the Leave Means Leave voice is all over this country, that'll reflect in the opinion polls. The stronger we are, the less chance there is of that second referendum ever being able to happen.
Can I just say on the immigration issue, because I didn't get in on that. I mean, whatever immigration system we come up with when we leave the European Union, my bottom line is that no citizen of the European Union should have any special privileges over any citizen of the rest of the world, particularly the Commonwealth. Right, and on the referendum, I mean, I don't think there will be a referendum. I was again quite pleased. I sound like I'm her favourite, a fan of hers today, but I was quite pleased. The Prime Minister yesterday said again very clearly, you know, there would not be a second referendum. And if all I can say is that coming from an area where a lot of people, I'm afraid, did vote Remain in London, many of them say to me, look, now we need to get on with it. We did vote Remain. We just want to leave. And I think some of those actually, if there was another referendum, would actually think now, having seen the way the EU behaved, we would leave. So it might be a bigger and better vote in the end to leave, but we don't need it, we don't want it, and you can make sure that it doesn't happen.
Thank you. So I think that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much for your questions, and a big round of applause for the panel. Thank you.
Okay. Quite a few interviews. So I'm just asking the panel to leave because I know they have to do TV interviews for the 5 o'clock news programmes. Take a seat, take a seat, take a seat. I have 4 things to do. 4 things to do. First thing is to thank you all for coming here today. We really appreciate it. Thank you very much for coming. The second thing is join, leave means leave. Sign up on the website. The third thing is write to your MPs. It's on the back of the leaflet. And I have one final request, because you're the stars of this show. I want you all to grab your placards, hold them up, stand up, then we can get a photograph of you.
Stand there and cheer them on.
Okay?
Stand there and cheer them on.
Hold up those placards. Let the world see that we believe in Britain and we want to stop the Brexit betrayal. Very good. Fantastic. Have a safe journey home.